right, is this nebulous term that we have created in the dev world, and it stands for two things: authorization and authentication. Does anyone have an idea of what the difference would be? Those English words. Cool. So we'll get started. Yeah? Okay, no problem. I don't want to put people on the spot. So the idea here is that if you are authenticated, you are who you say you are. If you're authorized, then you are allowed to do something. So for example, this is a favorite example of mine. Let's just say, who has like flown before, right? You've flown, been on aeroplanes? Very good. The idea here is that when you go to the airport and you go through TSA, right before you get your ticket, you have to authenticate. You have to show your driver's license and or your passport, and you have to say, hey, my name is Evans Wangtron. This is definitely me. Here's my driver's license. There's a picture of it that also verifies that Evans Wang looks like this. That was verified by the New York State when I went to go get my driver's license. Good God. 18 years ago? Oh my God. A long time ago. Cool? That tells them that I am who I say I am. Then they issue me a ticket. That ticket authorizes me to get through security and also authorizes me to board an airplane. Once I pass security, can I board? All right, this is obviously very distracting to some of you. It's the same thing over and over, right? Just so you know. Once I'm through security, can I board any airplane I want at any gate? Thank you. The system works. So the idea here is that just because I'm authenticated does not mean I am authorized. Fair? So the idea here is simply auth is two things, authentication and authorization. Today we're going to simply talk about authentication, which is going to be, are you who you say you are? How do you prove who you are over the internet if I cannot really see your face? Modern technology has implemented like fingerprinting, right, which is super cool. But the way it worked in ye olden days, right, and still a viable method today, is just this username password. The idea is that if I know my name and I know this like secret word that I told you about earlier, and only you and I know about this word, and I told you like, hey, the password is pineapple. And you're like, oh, Evans Pineapple. Yep, you're definitely who you are. And you're not some weirdo clone faking to be Evans. Does that make sense? So the username and password is fairly good idea in practice and in theory. And so the idea here is that like I want to be able to create this username and password. Do you want to save your users' passwords in your database? Okay, let me try again. Do you want to save your users' passwords in your database? That's the one, right? You'd want to save the password in the database. It's the only way you can retrieve the password later to verify, but you don't want to save them in plain text. In the same way that in your authentication, in your token, in your cookie, you don't want that to be plain text. So we need a way to figure out how we can take a plain text string and turn it into something that is like a complete jarble, that is unreadable and ununderstandable in English. Cool? So let's do this. Let's check out a little Rails action. I think I have Bcrypt in here, right? Bcrypt. Oops. Cool. So can everyone see this? Can you see now? Airborne. So the idea here is that with the magic of Bcrypt, I think there was like 2 MIT doctorates that figure out a algorithm. So like you can hashify anything. You could take a string like your boy and put it through a very complicated hashing algorithm like this. and get something that is not the original string. The problem is this amazing hashing algorithm is very easily broken. Believe it or not, it's very easily crackable. What you want to do is you want to be able to figure out something that cannot be reverse engineered and cannot be readable. So Bcrypt, which is like industry best practice for like creating these things, what you can do is you can do Bcrypt password. Who has seen this before, like the double colon? Cool. It's called name spacing. And what that means is, like in mod 1, you've probably seen this. You had a module that inherited from like a class that inherited from a module. And then you can like literally run methods on it, right? So like create. And what I want to do is I want to create a brand new Bcrypt password. I'm not going to ask you for your password because you might actually give it to me. So I looked up a list a long time ago with my buddy Andrew, and for whatever reason, Michael was like in the top 10 most popular passwords in like 2016 or something. I don't know. Did anyone famous 2016? Huh? Okay. Oh, Michael Jackson died that year? Okay, well, bless up to MJ. Cool. So what I get back here is this like ridiculous string. Do you think that something like this would be safe to save in the database versus something like this? Cool. Do you think it's smart if this hashing algorithm produces the exact same text every single time I put in the exact same password? If I run this again, should I get, in your ideal world, should I get the exact same string? No. It's different every time. And so far, this is quite effective. And the idea here is that what I want to do is check, let's do this. Can I do something like this? Paste. Oh, that didn't work. Is that double equal to Bcrypt password dot create with Michael? Whoops. False. Cool. What about this? And I just run this again. False. That's weird. How can I actually use this to verify now? Well, let's take a look. What does this return? Well, actually I should say this. Let's have cool password equal to just this create action. Cool. So far so good? So when I look at cool password, what should I get? I should get that weird string-like looking object. Cool. Can I do this? And I just go bloop. What do you think? Yes, no, maybe so? False. Whoa. Mind-blowing. That's weird. So let's try it the other way. Bloop. And double equal to cool password. Okay. Let's try this one more time. Ready? Let's try this instead. Oop. Dot new. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do this. Cool password. What is the class? Let's take a look at what it is one more time. Oop. What is the class? Try again. Here's what's happening. When I did bcrypt.create with Michael, I literally created a brand new bcrypt object. In the same way that if I had class dog and I did dog.create, or I had a class user and I did user.create, what type of object does that give me? It gives me either the dog or the user, or whatever class I ran .create on. It gives me an instance of that. The thing is, it just looks like a string here. Is this useful to us? Where in here am I using Michael? Nowhere. I'm not using Michael anywhere here. So what I would like to do is something like, I don't know. It's embarrassing. Cool. Dot new. And I want to pass in this object. Cool. And I want to compare that to Michael. Yeah, I know, it's a little weird, a little tricky stuff. All right, the reason this is useful for us is all I'm doing is I'm creating a brand new password, right? So new and create do two separate things here. Create will create a brand new instance of the object, whereas new will run a certain type of code with a hashified password. I can then compare that to whether or not it was the original value. This is useful. Whereas, let's see, who thinks this will work? That looks pretty similar, right? So, let's analyze this. I'm going to create a brand new instance of this bcrypt password, passing in as an argument a bcrypt object, right? Hashified bcrypt password. I can compare that bcrypt object to the string Michael and get true. However, if I compare the string Michael to that same thing, it's false. Let's explore. You guys remember monkey patching? Yes, no? Monkey patching? All right, cool. Let's take a look at what's going on in here. Bloop, bloop, bloop. I think it's in library, bcrypt, password. Cool, so you see module bcrypt right here. And then it literally creates a class password that inherits from the string class. So, if you remember mod 1, you can take objects and you can send them messages, right? I don't know, sort. You can send them method calls. Does that make sense? You can also monkey patch. You can overwrite things, right? Like if I were to go right into class array, right? What's like a popular one? Length, right? Def length. And let's just say I'm going to return, I don't know, alley. Cool. Boom, boom. So if I take any array, right? Boop, 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 and I call length on it, what should I get? Cool. I can overwrite the methods. Does that make sense? Cool. Here, I'm taking in from the string class. I'm going to, this is a fancy way of doing, anything that follows here is going to be a class method. Cool. This is a fancy way of doing it. Instead of doing self dot on all of them, you can do this. So, let's take a look at, boom, boom. You're literally overwriting the double equals here. You're overriding the double equals. So that what that means is when I call this, I'm calling dot double equals. So the idea here is I'm doing dot double equals method, and I'm passing in an argument of Michael. Does that make sense? That's what I'm doing. This is just syntactical sugar for this. So far, so good. I'm overriding the double equals. And because I'm calling double equals on a Bcrypt object, what method will run? This one. Versus when I do the other one, this double equal is being called on Michael, the string Michael. So here, this is the comparison operator that you know and are familiar with, versus this one, which is actually calling a different monkey-patched overridden method, which is why the results are different. Does that make sense to you now? So monkey patching is extremely dangerous, but has very good use cases for it. So the idea behind Bcrypt is, do we have like vegetarians in here? You don't? Okay, cool. So let's just say you had a vegetable grinder, right? You had a vegetable grinder, and you put in like broccoli and celery and any other cool vegetables, and you just put it through this grinder, and it comes out on the other end. Can you identify just visually what that green mush is? Like, can you look at that and be like, oh man, that's definitely broccoli and celery mixed together? No way, it just looks like green mush. But can I take in some of it, test it through the powers of science and DNA? Can I identify whether or not it has bits of broccoli and celery in there? Can you put this green mush back into the vegetable grinder, reverse it, and get back this brand new stalk of celery and broccoli? No. So the idea of Bcrypt is it's a one-way transformation. It goes inside this word grinder, and it comes out hashified. You can test it to see, is it actually coming from the password Michael? But it cannot go back and ever recreate the string Michael, so that if your database ever gets hacked, they will have literally hundreds of thousands of these hashified passwords that they cannot reverse engineer and get the fact that it's Michael. Do you understand the usefulness of this and why we do this? Cool. Let's write some code. Great. So the idea that I need you to follow along with me is I will simply have in my user's new a form for. That looks pretty normal, right? I have a form for, a little user action, a little password action. How did I describe and how do you understand how form for works in regards to these text fields? How does the form for know what to put inside the text field? It calls the method. It does, that's right. It calls the method for those that did not hear the mysterious stranger. It will literally do @user.username, @user.password. Does that make sense? Yeah, you remember this, right? Just lie to me. Yeah, right? Yeah, of course you do. Cool, if you don't, that's how it works. So let's take a look at the schema. Little DB action, little schema action. And I see username, and I see something called password digest. Therefore, on my user's new, does @user.password exist as a method? No, it does not. So would it be mind-blowing if I saw an error on my user's new? Cool. if I saw my users new, a error that says undefined method password. Right, it would not be surprising, right? Thank you. Wow. Just blanketly stare at me for a while, that's fine. So what I can do is I can hack it. And how I can do that is, inside my user object, I can simply bring in a method called password returning literally anything. Right? It does not matter, it'll just return. Right? I can even return add password if I want to. Add password is nothing, it does not matter. It's just a getter method. Cool? So if I do that and I refresh, it will call at user.password. Okay? Whenever you're ready, Rails. Waiting on you. Cool. It will work. It will call that method, but that method will return like nothing or junk. And my form will still just render. So far, so good? All right, this is the idea that you're gonna like create a user here. Cool? So we have to incorporate sessions. Because we want sessions, because we want that user to exist, request after request. So let's take a look. What we want to do is when this form submits, right? Like, Mike Chang, bless up, right? We have a password here, right? Like cats, right? Mike Chang likes cats. We have Mike Chang, bless up, and we have a password called cats. What happens in this create user button? It posts to /users, and that hits the create action in the users controller. That's exactly correct. And so in the user, oh my God, in the users controller, we have this create. Inside the create is where I will establish the session. So far, so good? Like it makes sense that once I sign in, I create this user, I create this session right here. So far, so good? Yes, no? You sure? You sure? All right, cool. Then I redirect to that user. Yes. One more time? Sure. Session is just a hash. It persists just like Flash, except it persists for more than one request. I'm creating a new key called user ID, and I'm simply assigning it the value of the user ID. I can't hear you. I don't know if that was like another question or. Cool. Awesome. Good question. So now what I want to do is back to the user. When I do this, right, and I hit this create action, this user params, what is it going to try to do on this line in plain English? That's right, it's going to create a new user. So what it's going to do is it's going to take the user params, and under username, it's going to go username equals. Under password, it's going to go password equals. And then assign it the params data. Does that make sense? That's what it's doing. That's all it's doing. If that's the case, do I have password equals inside my model? No, because I don't have the password attribute. What I have instead is a password digest. The reason it's called password digest is because I needed to go through, I needed to pull the plain text password, and then I need to overwrite the plain text password with my Bcrypt password, and then save it as this digested password, the one that ran through the word grinder, the one that ran through the vegetable grinder so that it's now it's crazy hash. So inside the user, I'm just going to create a new method called password equals. It's going to take in the plain text password, which is going to be what's coming from params. And all I'm going to do is call self.passwordDigest. Here I'm taking the password digest attribute, and I'm literally going to assign it the Bcrypt hashified password. Does that logic make sense? Just quick thumbs up in the air. Or 2 hands if it doesn't make sense. 1 if it does, 2 if it doesn't. Okay, I'm just going to go over one more time. Remember, when you create the user, right here in the user's controller, what you're going to do is take the params, and it's going to take the params and do username equals params key username. Password equals params at a key of password. What comes over on the params? It's going to try to assign it. What I want to do, let's do it right here. Cool. Let's do this. If I were to put Alan Turing, password, computer, hit create user. I'm going to hit this by bug. When I do this user.create, unknown attribute password for user. Why would it say that? Because it actually has an attribute called password.digest, not password. It is going to try to assign the password to equal something, but it won't work because it has password digest as the attribute. Remember what active record builds for you. Active record inside the user's model will build you the, oh yeah, you like that? R? Just R tab, add a reader. That would have been useful in mod 1. Cool. All right, you have like username, then you have like password digest, because those are the columns in the database. Here we don't have password. So password equals and def password do not exist. It's going to try to overwrite the password here with the params. But it doesn't exist. Password digest exists. So what we have to do is tell it, what does the method password equals look like? We're just going to create the adder writer. It's going to take in the plain text password, and it's going to put inside password digest the Bcrypt hashified password. So let's see what happens. Oop. Okay, go back. Oh, just kidding. That's just comments. Bloop, right? Bloop. Password. Bloop. Burp. And here, I'm just gonna hit user.create. Actually, I'll just hit this line. Watch this right next. Boom. And look what it did. Password digest is now this hashified password, because I literally did self.passworddigest equals the bcrypt.create. I just created the hashified password. You've seen what bcrypt.create does in the terminal. Yes? And all I did is I assigned that attribute. So, I just overwrote the password. I stopped it right here, and then I assigned the password digest to the bcrypt create. And so, password digest is now the hashified password. And then I create this session. I can use that session anywhere I want now, which we'll get into more in part 2 of this lecture on Wednesday. Cool. Hey, look at this. Oh, bloop. Fire. You guys don't like Guy Fieri, do you? Keep that in mind. I mean, I'll keep it in mind. I'm still going to use Guy Fieri. The next thing we need is, at some point, we have to verify, are you who you say you are? So what kind of methods are these? Class or instance methods? They're instance methods, right? So what I want to do is I want to create a new instance method called authenticate. The idea that I want you to follow me is later on at some point in your application, you're going to ask a user to sign in. And they're just going to have a login page. And it's going to look probably something, spoiler alert, right? Like this. I mean, there's no bells and whistles here, right? I'm just trying to explain something to you. Cool? I'm going to click this login button, and it's going to send a username and params over as plain text. I need to be able to take that username, and I need to be able to take that plain text password, and I need to be able to authenticate that user. So the first thing you should be thinking about is, great, I have some username like Bangarang, whatever, right? I mean, that's just my drop-down stuff. I'm going to do like a user.findBy name Bangarang and see, hey, does that user exist? If that user exists, I'm probably going to call another instance method on it called .authenticate. And I'm going to pass in the params at a key of password. So far, so good. Does that make sense? I need to find the user by the username because they're going to give it to me. And then I need to call authenticate on them with params password, whatever the user passed in. Right? Let's say this password is Rufio, whatever, right? Huh? Skrillex is cool, but not really. So, right, the idea is that I need to be able to authenticate. So, I'm going to create another method called authenticate. And it's going to take in the params at a key of password, the plain text password. And all I needed to do is I'm going to do the .new on this, taking in the hashified password. We saw this work already. Calling in the double equals on the Bcrypt object, comparing it against the plain text password. And then, if that's good, I should return, right, the object, like the user, like return true or something. Else, false. Cool? So this authenticate should say, hey, yes, that user with that password, that's them. Otherwise, false. Even though they put in Rufio, even though they put in like Bangarang here, their password's not in fact Rufio. It's something else. False. Do not authenticate. Did that make sense? That's really all that method does. Cool. All right. That's really about it. Do you guys like being upset? Cool. Yep. Nobody? All right. It's okay. I know I wasn't feeling good earlier, but you guys are not feeling good. Cool. Yeah, so what this method will do is it will build all of this for you. Thank you. It will also build in a validation, meaning like your username also has to have like a password. You can't create a user without a password. So it also builds in some sweet validations. Are there any questions about authentication? All right, so Wednesday, unless you want to watch the video, please watch the video. It will explain the process of logging in. Right? When I hit login, what route do I want to hit? What controller do I want to hit? How do I create sessions? What I'll do is I will upload the code for you, And look, this is what it does, right? I'm going to find the user, and then I'm going to run authenticate on them. Then I'm going to create a session, and then I'm going to redirect to the user. If the authenticate fails, flash at a key of notice saying invalid username and password, redirect to the login path. There's other things that happen here, but this is basically what the code looks like. You'll also see in the application controller, there's some other helpful, useful methods, and we'll get into that in part 2. All right, I will push the whole code base up. If you follow and watch the video, you will have this code base to reference, and you can implement auth tomorrow. Cool? That's all I have for you today. Thanks.